All right, our next theory of human behavior is the exchange and choice perspective. Sometimes this is referred to as rational choice or rational theory. It's all essentially the same. This is just the most current language around it because it's incorporating pieces. The exchange piece is really the important piece that kind of changed a little bit because we're looking at different dynamics versus just rational thought and choice. So this perspective focuses on the process of how individuals and collective actors seek and exchange resources and the choices made in the pursuit of those resources. So the key points within this is that individual and then collective actors, so that would be like a society, a group, a community, they'll engage in social exchange of materials and non-material resources and make choices in pursuit of those resources. So choices in a social exchange are based off of self-interest as well as community interest. So that's kind of where that rational piece comes in is according to this theory, people are making choices, weighing the pros and cons, the cost benefit analysis to make sure whatever option they're choosing is going to benefit them the most. So when you kind of throw in that piece of community interest, it does beg to ask the question of what happens when the community interest isn't necessarily aligned with the individual self-interest. So that's going to be a reflection in the strength and weakness. But another key point is that social exchange are based off of both reason and emotion. So that would be kind of the rational and the motive thinking. And it's also based on the individual's values, norms, and expectations, which will kind of tie into the strengths and weaknesses as well. The exchange piece is kind of focusing on the norm that there's going to be a reciprocal exchange or commonality, that if I'm giving something, I'm receiving something in return, that it's not a one-sided exchange. But as we know with the conflict theory, that often relationships are unbalanced. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's unintentional. And so that ties in with the fact that the power then comes from unequal resources in exchanges. So there is kind of a tie-in to the conflict theory. You can kind of see how looking through both of those lenses is examining a situation in a broader perspective, and they can be used to enhance each other. So some strengths here's our little lovely diagram. So you can see that if you are trying to weigh a choice, the benefits and the cost, you're bringing in your values, expectations, norms, social capital, so things that you're like your resources that you're bringing in yourself. And the things that determine our benefits and costs are both emotion and reason. So strengths and weaknesses of this perspective, because it's talking about a mutual exchange and some sort of giving and receiving of resources, it's really useful to look at when you're thinking about dyads, so the one-on-one relationship, families and groups, because there's lots of players involved in this. There is some exploration of non-people players, so exchanges with technology or screens or some sort of non-human relationship, just because our world is changing a little bit. But there has to be a relationship between two things in order to have an exchange. Does help understand diversity in behavior. So if you're wondering why somebody might have made a certain choice, it might be helpful to ask them, like, how did you come to that? What were the pros and cons in your decision? And kind of look at that rational choice decision making, because everyone's going to come in with their different value set. And then recognizing that power is coming from unequal resources in the exchange process. So kind of the cousin and partner to the conflict theory. Weaknesses is that if everyone is looking for the most rewarding behavior, how is it possible that everybody can achieve that? Because not everybody comes in with the same expectations, desires, and needs. And there's not going to necessarily, if you would then spread out all the resources equally, somebody might need more. And so is that person then not achieving the most rewarding behavior? So there's some inconsistency with that. And it is difficult to measure the rewards and cost and fairness because, again, those are subjective based on person's situation, values, backgrounds, culture, biases, assumptions. And so it's not super easy to measure those things in a quantitative way. And there's not a lot of emphasis on the time dimension, so it's looking more at environmental and person, and we're not really looking at the long-term decision making, how a decision may impact over time, because it's more looking at in the moment, weighing the pros and cons. So using this in social work, it does promote the importance of human relationships because you're exchanging things. Again, it's not always just resources, but it might be ideas or time, or non-material goods. And so those are all really important to relationships. If you're noticing in a family set or a community or a group that there's an unsatisfactory pattern of exchange, so if one family member is managing everything while the whole household, cleaning, cooking, et cetera, while the rest of the family is sitting on the couch watching TV and the individual managing everything is unhappy, well, we can talk about that with a family group, talking about the exchange and choices that people are making. It is useful for kind of that macro level social work, influencing social policy, because a lot of times you want to justify how your intervention or approach would benefit the larger whole. And so you're kind of looking at that rational decision making. Talked a little bit about the families, like that fourth bullet point. And it also, like I mentioned in the previous slides, is you can look at the networks of exchange that go beyond just human to human interactions. And you can also look at like between, let's say like a job system. So not necessarily your boss, but to an organization or to your community or to how much time you're spending on a phone, you're exchanging your time resource there. So it kind of does look at multiple systems, and it can be really useful for individuals.